The dawn in Denver brought a particular peace to the neighborhood, where John and Mary had lived for over 20 years. They resided in a small wooden house, surrounded by a modest yet well-tended garden that Mary cared for lovingly. With her gentle, dedicated hands, Mary cultivated rose bushes and small aromatic herbs like mint and rosemary. She took a special pleasure in caring for their home, making every detail cozy and simple, yet filled with affection. At 43, John was a robust man, his skin weathered from the sun and long hours working in construction. He woke up early every day, adjusted his safety helmet, and set out to the streets of Denver to build buildings and structures. His body was accustomed to the physical strain, and he took pride in his work. He was an honest, hard-working man, respected by his colleagues for his skill and dedication. When he returned home, the routine was always the same. Mary waited for him with dinner ready, always something simple and homemade, like a hot soup on cold days or a roast on the weekends. She prepared everything with care and love, serving him with a serene smile as she listened to stories about his day, the challenges he faced, and the small victories he achieved. Yet, in recent weeks, John seemed more distant and quiet. Mary noticed the change in her husband but chose not to mention it. She thought that perhaps the weight of work was piling up on him and didn't want to pressure him. For her, silent companionship was a way of showing love, and she believed that when John was ready to talk, he would. At 47, Mary had the serene look of someone who had always lived for her home and the well-being of her loved ones. She never asked much from life. Beside John, she felt complete, content with what they had built together. She didn't seek luxury or adventure, but valued the certainty of a secure love and an honest life. And for her, that was enough. But for John, something inside was changing. That week, during a quick lunch at work, a colleague encouraged him to buy a lottery ticket. It was a casual conversation filled with laughter and jokes about getting rich overnight. However, John felt a sudden urge and decided to buy a ticket, albeit without high expectations. Who knows, he thought, as he slipped the ticket into his coat pocket. Days later, when he checked the numbers, he felt a wave of disbelief. The numbers matched perfectly, and he couldn't believe what was in front of him. When he confirmed he had won, John remained silent, frozen. A feeling of euphoria washed over him, followed by a mix of relief and ambition. The prize was substantial, enough to change his life forever, and the thought that it was now all his began to shift his thinking. The possibility of living a different life, free from years of sacrifice and hard work in construction, captivated him so much that he felt a thrill like never before. He could finally leave it all behind and pursue his desires, even those he had never confessed to anyone. Dreams of having more than a life of work and exhaustion began to take shape, and deep down, a voice whispered that maybe he didn't need to share this fortune. Still holding the ticket, John wondered if he should tell Mary about the prize. She was his wife, his partner of so many years, yet at that moment, he felt a strange weight on his chest. The thought of sharing the prize made him hesitate. After all, Mary had always been so simple, so content with the life they led. Would she even understand the kind of freedom that this money now promised him? He didn't know how to share his excitement without feeling that, perhaps, she would want to continue with the same life, the same routine. Their years together had brought security and affection, but also something that in that moment felt limiting to him. John wondered if, somewhere within himself, he wanted something more. So he decided that, at least for now, he would keep it a secret. The next day, he woke up with a mix of tension and excitement. The routine continued as usual. He got up, drank the coffee Mary had made, and left for work with the ticket safely tucked in his wallet. The weight of that small piece of paper, which felt so light, now dominated his thoughts every moment. From then on, the changes in John became more noticeable, at least to Mary. He, who used to share stories about his day, began to avoid long conversations and grew distant in their daily interactions. When she asked about work, he replied briefly and quickly changed the subject. At meals, he seemed anxious, checking his watch as if he were always in a hurry. Mary noticed but thought it might just be a phase. She began to wonder if she should have an open conversation with him about it, but hesitated. The fear of discovering something amiss between them held her back. So for now, she just observed, hoping he would return to being the same husband he had always been, with the patience and warmth they had always shared. Meanwhile, John started to quietly devise a plan. He knew he couldn't keep the secret forever. He thought about how he could resolve his situation, and to that end, he began discreetly researching divorce proceedings during his breaks. He didn't want Mary to have any claim on his money, To him, this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and the thought of losing it was bothering him less and less. One afternoon, on his way home from work, John stopped in front of a luxury store. Through the display window, he saw a watch he'd never even considered buying under normal circumstances. He stepped inside, admiring every detail of the elegant environment, quite different from the modest shops he was used to. A friendly salesperson soon approached him, presenting expensive models with a casual confidence that left John fascinated. He imagined that, in a short time, he could have all of it, no restrictions. Instead of listening to his conscience, which warned him something was wrong, he allowed himself to fantasize. Back at home, John continued to act cautiously, but that excitement made him almost unrecognizable to Mary, who, in her kindness, tried not to bother him. She missed the days when he'd embrace her as he walked in the door, when they'd spend hours on the porch, talking about the little events of their day. The man beside her seemed more distant by the day, and it weighed on her heart, but she feared he might be carrying a burden he couldn't bring himself to share. Mary found solace in Lisa, the young neighbor and close friend who spent some afternoons with her, chatting about college and helping with small chores around the house. Lisa was like a daughter to Mary, and the two found comfort in each other's company. That week, Lisa noticed that Mary seemed more thoughtful and quieter than usual. One afternoon, as they had tea, Lisa decided to ask, "Mary, is everything okay? You seem worried these days." Mary smiled, but her gaze was distant. "Oh, Lisa, I don't know. John's been so different, so distant. It's like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, but I don't know why." Lisa furrowed her brow, puzzled. She'd known the couple for years and knew how close they were. Hearing this gave her a sense of unease, but she tried to reassure Mary. "Maybe it's just work, Mary. Sometimes men close up when they're stressed." Mary agreed, but the doubt lingered. Lisa, on the other hand, became more watchful. She knew Mary was discreet and didn't want to disturb John, but seeing her friend's distress, she felt compelled to observe him more closely. In the days that followed, Lisa noticed subtle changes in John's behavior whenever she ran into him. The man who used to be polite and friendly now always seemed rushed, almost as if he was avoiding any prolonged encounters. Something wasn't adding up. Though she didn't fully understand why, Lisa knew something was wrong, and it left her feeling uneasy. Mary carried on with her routine, trying to ignore the suspicions beginning to sprout in her heart. She believed their marriage was strong and that any problem could be overcome with time. But as the days passed, the distance between them seemed to grow even wider, as if a chasm was forming where once there was love and connection. That Saturday morning, Mary woke up early as usual and went to make breakfast. She set the table with care, hoping John would use the weekend's downtime to relax and maybe be the loving, present husband he once was. But he came down the stairs with a distant look, mumbled a quick "good morning," and instead of sitting down for breakfast, grabbed his jacket and left the house without a word. Mary watched the door close, holding a cup of coffee that now tasted flavorless. His behavior wasn't normal, and she began to sense that something much bigger was going on. She decided she needed to talk to someone about it. She walked over to Helen's house, her neighbor and Lisa's mother, hoping to unburden herself and perhaps receive advice to ease her worries. Helen listened carefully to every word Mary shared. They had been friends for many years, and Helen knew the couple had always been close and loving. When Mary finished describing John's behavior, Helen gave her a sympathetic look. "You know, Mary, sometimes men keep things to themselves because they think they can handle it all alone. But if this is bothering you, maybe it's time for a straightforward conversation. Just the two of you." Mary nodded, but deep down, fear held her back. She was afraid of what she might discover, and preferred to believe that maybe John was simply tired or worried about something temporary. Yet the unease didn't fade. She realized that, in recent days, he seemed more irritable and avoided any kind of closeness. The warmth and attention they once shared were slipping away, like sand through her fingers. While Mary was at Helen's house, Lisa came home from college. Seeing the sadness in Mary's expression, she immediately asked what was going on. Helen quickly filled her in on Mary's concerns, and Lisa sat beside her, her face serious. She had already noticed changes in John, but hearing Mary talk about her worries made her feel something was very wrong. Her desire to help Mary grew even stronger, and she decided she would keep a closer eye on John. After the conversation, Mary went home feeling a bit lighter, though still troubled. When John returned in the late afternoon, she tried to connect with him. She prepared a simple dinner, his favorite dish, and set the table with care, hoping that a pleasant atmosphere might bring them closer again. But John seemed distant, looking at his plate without really savoring the food. Mary tried to start a conversation. "John, is everything okay? I feel like you've been so distant. If there's something bothering you, we can talk about it." He looked up for a moment, surprised, but quickly looked away. He poked at his food awkwardly and responded in a harsh tone that took her by surprise. "Mary, I'm just tired. Work has been demanding and sometimes I just want some peace. No need to ask so many questions." Fed up, Mary fell silent, feeling a tightness in her chest. She knew John could be reserved, but that tone was unusual for him. She chose not to push it further, though her intuition told her something much bigger was hiding behind that exhaustion. In the days that followed, John continued to act strangely, and Mary was enveloped by a quiet sadness. She started to question if she was being a good wife, wondering if she was somehow to blame for the distance between them. She tried her best to make him comfortable and happy, but with each affectionate gesture, John seemed to pull further away. Meanwhile, Lisa began discreetly observing John's behavior. She, who had always seen him as a kind and hard-working man, started to notice the coldness with which he treated Mary and the way he avoided looking her in the eye. Determined to protect her friend, Lisa began researching the possibility of some financial problem or another reason that could explain his change in behavior. One afternoon, while observing him, Lisa saw John carefully checking something in his wallet, looking over a document he kept in a special compartment. When he noticed someone watching him, he quickly put it away and shot a suspicious glance in her direction. That gesture piqued Lisa's curiosity even more. She realized that to help Mary, she would need to dig deeper into whatever was going on. Lisa started spending more time with Mary, always ready to listen and offer support. During one of her visits, as they sat on the porch, Mary confided that she felt her marriage was falling apart, though she didn't know why. Lisa, who had always admired Mary's kindness and generosity, felt even more resolved to uncover the truth. "Mary, have you considered that maybe there's something else besides work bothering John?" Lisa asked, choosing her words carefully. Mary looked at her, confused and a bit uncomfortable. "Something besides work? What do you mean?" "I don't know, maybe..." Lisa hesitated. "Maybe something else is affecting him. He's been acting so different, hasn't he?" Mary shook her head, as if trying to dismiss any negative thoughts. For her, the idea that John could be hiding something serious was almost unthinkable. Still, Lisa's suggestion planted a small seed of doubt, and it made her reflect on details she might have been overlooking. Meanwhile, John continued with his plans in secret. He was now determined to get a divorce without Mary finding out about his lottery winnings. He had even discreetly consulted a lawyer to ensure he could protect his prize. The ticket was always tucked away in his wallet, and he checked it every day to make sure it was safe. In his mind, he justified his actions by telling himself that he deserved the money. After all, he was the one who bought the ticket. At the same time, he felt a pang of guilt, but brushed it aside with rationalizations he invented for himself. Mary was a good woman, but maybe life with her was a kind of prison he hadn't recognized until now. With the money, he could go anywhere, do anything, and somehow these thoughts enticed him more each day. The gulf between John and Mary continued to widen, and deep down, she felt something slipping away. This marriage, once full of love and security, was disintegrating without her knowing the real reason. Lisa, on the other hand, felt that a dark truth was on the verge of being revealed. She just needed one more clue to understand what was really going on with John, and then she could finally help Mary uncover the truth behind her husband's distance. The following weeks brought the same heavy, silent routine. Mary, who tried to ignore the growing pain of watching her husband drift further away, kept herself busy with household chores and the occasional visits from Lisa. The young woman, always kind, was like a daughter to her, and her company became a comfort on days when the loneliness felt especially present. One Sunday afternoon, while Mary was gathering clothes to wash, Lisa showed up with a freshly baked cake, as she occasionally did. Noticing her friend's tired expression, Lisa gently took Mary out to the porch, where they could talk in peace. The day was pleasant, with a light breeze swaying the branches in the backyard, and they sat in wooden chairs, surrounded by the soft sound of rustling leaves. Lisa observed Mary, who was gazing at the garden with a look of sadness. "Mary, you know you can count on me, don't you?" Lisa asked gently, breaking the silence. Mary sighed, managing a faint smile, but her eyes reflected deep pain. "I know, Lisa. It's just, I don't know if there's anything I can do. John's been so distant and I can't understand why. I'm afraid he doesn't love me anymore, But at the same time, I feel like I shouldn't think that way. We've been together so long, it's hard to imagine everything just changing like that. Lisa took her hand, trying to offer strength. I don't think you should ignore what you're feeling, Mary. Sometimes we have to face reality, even if it's difficult. I see you're hurting and that worries me. Mary looked at Lisa, moved by the young woman's understanding. She hesitated, feeling the weight of her own words. I've been thinking a lot about it. I wonder if somehow it's my fault. I've always been simple, never wanted anything grand. Maybe John wants more and maybe I'm just not enough. Lisa looked at her firmly, almost indignant that Mary could blame herself for something that was clearly John's responsibility. Mary, you've always been a devoted wife, a generous and kind person. If something's going on, it's not your fault. Don't carry that burden. If John's hiding something, you have the right to know. Those words struck Mary deeply, but she still resisted accepting that the problem could be so serious. She preferred to believe it was just a phase, that maybe her husband was simply going through a rough patch at work. However, Lisa seemed certain there was more to it, and Mary's heart was torn between the fear of the truth and the desire to protect her marriage. A few days later, John began to show signs of impatience. He had decided he couldn't delay his plan much longer. The lottery money called to him, and the desire for a new life free from the bonds of his past seemed increasingly irresistible. He just needed to make sure Mary wouldn't have a claim to the prize. That night, while Mary slept, John got up from bed and in silence opened the drawer where he kept some documents. He began sifting through some papers and quietly organized them into folders he would use for the divorce documents. He knew he was about to take a final and irreversible step, but the weight of that decision seemed to lessen each time he thought of what the money could bring. Meanwhile, Lisa decided she needed to be more proactive. She sought out a law professor at her college to ask for advice. Discreetly, she inquired about divorce cases and the rights of spouses when one side tried to hide assets or unexpected gains. The professor, unaware of her true motives, explained some concepts and informed Lisa about each party's rights. Lisa realized that Mary did indeed have a right to half of the prize, and she knew then that to protect her friend, she'd need to be more direct. Knowing John was clever and could act at any moment, Lisa decided she would try to confront him, albeit indirectly, in hopes of uncovering more clues. Days later, Lisa got an unexpected opportunity. One afternoon, while Mary was out running errands, Lisa saw John in the garden, looking at something in his wallet. He was holding the lottery ticket, but when he saw her approach, he quickly tried to hide it, closing the wallet and putting it back in his pocket. Without hesitation, Lisa decided to start a conversation. She knew she'd need to tread carefully, but at the same time she wanted to make it clear that he wasn't entirely safe in keeping his secret. "Hi, John. Everything all right?" she asked, sounding casual. John nodded, though his gaze seemed wary. "Yeah, everything's fine. Why do you ask?" Lisa smiled, trying to appear friendly, but with a hint of suspicion showing through. "Oh, it's just, you seem a little off lately. Mary's been worried about you, you know. She feels like you're distant, and I noticed it too. Are you sure everything's okay?" John looked away, visibly uncomfortable with the conversation. He wasn't ready to handle Lisa's persistence, and his expression turned serious. "I don't see why there's so much concern. I've just been busy, that's all." Lisa nodded, but kept her gaze fixed on him, as if trying to read his intentions. John felt the pressure and nervously tried to end the conversation. "I have to go inside now, Lisa. I need to get some things organized." Lisa watched him walk away, her expression a mix of frustration and anger. John was beginning to sense that Lisa might know more than he'd thought. He realized that if she got too close, it could jeopardize his plan. When Mary returned, Lisa decided it was time to be honest with her friend. With her heart pounding, she called Mary for a serious talk in the living room, where they could speak without prying eyes around. "Mary, I need to tell you something important. I think John's hiding something big. I'm not sure exactly what, but I think you need to be on guard because it might be more than you think." Mary felt her heart tighten. Lisa was always so straightforward, and hearing this from her friend shook her deeply. "Lisa, what do you think he could be hiding?" I don't know what to think. I'm not entirely sure yet, but he keeps a paper in his wallet, some kind of important document, and he guards it with unusual care. Haven't you noticed anything?" Mary shook her head. In her simple, trusting way, she had never thought of snooping through his things or questioning him about something so private. "I trust John. I never thought he'd keep secrets like that," Mary murmured, trying to process it all. But Lisa determined, looked her in the eye and said firmly, "I know this is hard, Mary, but I don't want you to get hurt or put yourself at risk. I think it's time for you to protect yourself, even if it means doing things you never imagined." Mary felt a mix of sadness and growing doubt. She knew Lisa was only trying to protect her, but deep down she still hoped this was all just a misunderstanding. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. The idea that John might be hiding something gnawed at her. She felt like she was losing control over her own life, and the uncertainty was tearing her apart. Could it be that after all these years, her husband was really planning something behind her back? Mary felt torn between the love she'd always had for John and the fear of being betrayed in the worst possible way. Mary spent the following days in silent anguish. Lisa's words echoed in her mind. Every gesture from John, every evasive glance, every short answer now seemed like proof that something serious was going on. Her love for him was now mixed with a growing pain, a feeling of mistrust that unsettled her and made her question the foundation of her marriage. Gradually, she began to notice details she'd once overlooked. She remembered how he'd started leaving the house on weekends, claiming he needed time to think. She also noticed he avoided talking about the future, something he once loved doing, discussing small home renovations or simple travel plans. Now, he seemed distant, uninterested in anything involving the two of them. One quiet night, as John slept, Mary lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. She wondered what was really happening with the man who had always been her companion. Unsure of where to start, she decided she needed to protect herself as Lisa had suggested, but without giving up on understanding the truth. The next morning, John left earlier than usual, saying he had personal matters to attend to before work. The excuse sounded vague, but Mary nodded, choosing not to question him. As soon as he left, she felt an impulsive urge to check his wallet, an impulse she'd never imagined having. She'd never thought that one day she'd consider going through her husband's belongings, but the anguish and uncertainty felt bigger than any fear of invading his privacy. With trembling hands, Mary picked up John's wallet, which he had left on the entryway table, just where he always left it each morning. She hesitated for a few seconds, questioning her decision, but Lisa's voice echoed in her mind, urging her to be strong and face whatever secrets were hidden. She took a deep breath, opened the secret compartment he always closed so carefully, and there she found a lottery ticket. Mary's eyes widened. For a moment, everything seemed to spin around her. She held the ticket, unable to believe what she was seeing. With shaking hands, she checked the printed numbers and slowly came to understand the truth. John had won a massive amount in the lottery and hadn't told her anything. The discovery felt like a knife to her heart. Here was the answer to all of John's strange behavior, the distance, the coldness in recent days. The man who had promised to be by her side through everything in good times and bad had decided to hide something so important, something that would completely change both of their futures. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal, forming an unbearable pain in her chest. Unsure of what to do, Mary called Lisa. Lisa's concerned voice came over the phone, and she quickly said she was on her way. A short while later, Lisa arrived and found Mary in the living room, still clutching the lottery ticket. Seeing the devastated look on her friend's face, Lisa understood immediately what was happening. "Mary, you found out," Lisa said, approaching and sitting beside her, her face filled with compassion. Mary, with tears in her eyes, handed the ticket to Lisa and tried to explain what she was feeling, but the words seemed trapped in her throat. "Lisa, he hid this from me. I never imagined John could do something like this. He's always been my partner, the man I trusted my life with. And now, all this was happening behind my back." Lisa held Mary's hand firmly, offering her support. "Mary, you don't deserve this. That prize should belong to both of you. You've always been by his side. It isn't fair, and I know it hurts, but you need to act. John seems to be planning to leave you with nothing, and you have a right to your share." Mary shook her head, still trying to process what it all meant. She couldn't believe her husband was willing to deceive her so cruelly, but the evidence was right there, in her hands. Lisa took a deep breath, determined. "Mary, we're not going to let this happen. I've looked into your rights a bit, and you're not alone. We need to take action before he finalizes this plan." At first, Mary hesitated. It was hard to accept that the person she loved could have changed so much. She still wanted to believe there was an explanation, that John would have a reason for this. But deep down, she knew Lisa was right. She needed to protect herself, as painful as it was. Lisa suggested they consult a lawyer immediately. She knew some colleagues who could help them quickly and efficiently. Mary reluctantly agreed, sensing that it was necessary. Before leaving, Lisa made sure to reinforce, "Remember, Mary, this is the least you deserve. You've always been by John's side, and if he's decided to act behind your back, then you need to make sure you won't be left with nothing. He doesn't have the right to betray you like this." Mary nodded, feeling an inner strength she hadn't known she possessed. She still loved John, but love wouldn't stop her from fighting for her rights and for the dignity he was trying to take away from her. In the days that followed, with Lisa's help, Mary gathered every bit of information she could about the prize and the rights she was entitled to. Lisa stayed by her side, and together the two women began to craft a strategy to confront John without him suspecting a thing. Mary knew it would be a difficult battle, but Lisa's presence gave her courage. Meanwhile, John continued with his plan, believing everything was under control. He had no idea that Mary already knew the truth, and that contrary to what he thought, she was growing stronger each day for the confrontation to come. Mary and Lisa spent the next few days quietly preparing. Mary wavered between the love she still felt for John and her growing determination not to let him deceive her. Knowing her husband had hidden the lottery prize and was planning a divorce to keep it all for himself was a betrayal almost too painful to bear. But with Lisa's help, she found the strength to move forward. Lisa, determined to help her friend, suggested they meet with an experienced divorce attorney together. Although still hesitant, Mary realized this was her only option. She needed to protect herself and ensure that John wouldn't leave her destitute after so many years of dedication and companionship. With Lisa's support, she scheduled an appointment with a trusted attorney who also happened to be her professor at college. On the day of the meeting, Mary was nervous. As she arrived at the attorney's office, the weight of the situation hit her. It was hard to admit she was there to protect herself from her own husband, someone she had always trusted. Lisa sat beside her, holding her hand firmly as they waited for the attorney. Soon, Mr. Collins, a calm man with a perceptive gaze, entered the room and greeted them with a soft, reassuring voice. He listened to Mary's story attentively, without interrupting her. When she finished, he took a deep breath and began explaining the legal situation. "Mary, in the state of Colorado, in a divorce, any significant financial gain, like this lottery prize, must be considered part of the couple's assets regardless of who bought the ticket. You have the legal right to half of the prize." Mary nodded, feeling a bit relieved but still anxious. "I understand, but John is hiding this from me. He kept the ticket a secret and is acting to make sure I don't get any share." Mr. Collins nodded thoughtfully. "It's a delicate situation, but we have options. First, we need to make sure the lottery ticket isn't removed from your reach or transferred without your consent. Second, it will be important to document everything we discover about his attempt to hide the prize. This could be crucial if we go to court." Mary looked at Lisa, feeling a surge of strength grow within her. For the first time, the thought of standing up to John seemed less daunting. She knew he would try to slip away, but now she was determined to fight. "I want to do this, Mr. Collins. Not just for the money, but for justice. I dedicated myself to this marriage, and it's not fair for him to treat me this way." Lisa smiled proudly at her friend for finally taking control of the situation. Mr. Collins continued, guiding them on the next steps. "Then we need to proceed cautiously. Until we formally file, I suggest you keep the ticket in a safe place. Also, continue to monitor any moves he makes that might indicate he's trying to speed up the divorce without ensuring you're aware of your rights. This will help us strengthen your case." Back at home, Mary felt a new sense of relief. There was something different in her gaze now. The sadness was still there, but alongside it was a new expression of courage. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Lisa was supporting her every step of the way, a gift for which Mary felt immensely grateful. Meanwhile, John, unaware of everything, continued with his own plans. One afternoon, he approached Mary in a calculated tone, suggesting that maybe their marriage had run its course and that it would be best for both if they went their separate ways. It hit Mary like a punch, and she had to summon all her strength to hide the pain she felt. "Mary, I think we both know things aren't like they used to be. Maybe we've reached the end," he said, trying to appear reasonable, though his gaze was cold, something Mary had never imagined seeing in her husband. She watched him in silence for a few moments, fighting back the anger and sadness that overwhelmed her. She knew this was a time to act calmly and precisely. "John, if that's what you want, I won't stop you, but I want everything to be done fairly," she replied, choosing her words carefully. John seemed surprised by her reaction, perhaps expecting more resistance or a plea for him to reconsider. His expression faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained control and nodded, pretending a calm he didn't truly feel. "Of course, it will be fair, Mary. I want what's best for both of us," he said, though he knew his intentions were different. In the following days, he hastened the preparations for the divorce, believing Mary had accepted the situation with resignation. He had no idea she knew everything, and that, along with Lisa, she was waiting for the right moment to confront him. Mary prepared herself, strengthened by Lisa's support and Mr. Collins's guidance. She knew the final confrontation was near, and that she had to be ready to face John as his equal, without fear and with determination. The love she had once felt for him made her hesitate at times, but now she could see how much greed had taken over his heart. So on a morning marked for signing the first documents, Mary and Lisa met at the lawyer's office. They both knew this would be a defining meeting, a pivotal moment in Mary's life. When John arrived, wearing a restrained, confident smile, he looked as if he believed he had everything under control. But little did he know what he was about to face. With Mr. Collins by her side, Mary felt a wave of determination. She looked at Lisa, who gave a reassuring nod, and in silence they waited for the meeting to start, knowing that John was about to find out his secret was not as well kept as he had thought. The lawyer's office was quiet, the air charged with almost palpable tension. John looked at Mary with a cold, confident expression, believing that within minutes he'd be on his way to a new life, free from obligations. He even tried on an expression of regret, as if he genuinely cared about Mary's well-being. Yet inside he could barely contain his satisfaction at being so close to seeing his plan through. Mary, beside Lisa and Mr. Collins, took a deep breath, recalling all the times she'd doubted herself and her ability to confront this betrayal. But now, something inside her had changed. She felt ready to face this man who had once been her partner, but now appeared as someone entirely different. Mr. Collins started the meeting, placing the divorce papers on the table and calmly explaining the process to both parties. "We're here to formalize the divorce proceedings between Mr. John and Mrs. Mary. As previously discussed, everything will be conducted fairly and transparently." John nodded with a calculated smile. "Yes, of course. It's best for both of us. I just want Mary to be okay," he said, trying to sound sincere. But beside him, Mary could no longer pretend to believe his words. Every fake gesture, every controlled look only confirmed how far he was willing to go to manipulate her. When the lawyer began explaining the terms of asset division, John interrupted in a casual tone. "Mary and I have always lived simply. We don't have many assets, so I think this process can go quickly. We just need to settle a few details about the house, right?" he remarked, as though the lottery winnings didn't exist. Mary looked directly at him, taking a deep breath to stay calm. In her mind, Lisa's words echoed. She deserved truth and justice, and now was the time to fight for them. "Actually, John, before we talk about dividing assets, there's something important I think you need to tell us," she said, her voice firm and serious. John hesitated for a moment, surprised by Mary's tone, but quickly tried to mask his unease. "What are you talking about, Mary?" Mary exchanged a look with Lisa, then turned back to John with a determined gaze. "I'm talking about the lottery prize, John. That ticket you've been hiding from me all this time." The room fell silent. John's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of shock. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, trying to find something to say, but no words made sense in that moment. The truth he had tried so hard to conceal was now inescapably exposed. How did you—" he stammered, his voice weak. Mary held his gaze, remaining resolute. "I found out, John, and now I'm here to make sure everything is handled fairly. That prize was won while we were still married, and I'm entitled to half of it." John felt his face flush, discomfort clear in his eyes. He tried to contain his anger and frustration, but indignation began spilling out in his words. "Mary, you don't understand. This money is my chance to live something new. We always had so little. I wanted to finally do something for myself." Mary pressed her lips together, fighting to stay composed. "And I stood by you all those years, John. I was the one who supported you through all the hard times, who took care of you and our home. I don't deserve to be deceived, left with nothing so you can live this new life on your own." Sensing the tension, Mr. Collins intervened, calm but firm. "Mr. John, I'd like to remind you that under Colorado law, this prize is considered marital property. Mrs. Mary has the legal right to half of the amount. We can proceed with the division agreement, or this can be settled in court." John frowned, feeling cornered. What he had so carefully planned, The secret he'd guarded so closely was now in Mary's hands and her lawyers. Even if he wanted to reverse the situation, he knew he couldn't contest Mary's right without further consequences for himself. He tried to gather his thoughts, but the blow of the revelation left him stunned. Mary, with a dignified gesture, continued, "I don't want to hurt you, John. What I want is what's fair. If it weren't for Lisa, I might never have discovered your plan, and you would have left me with nothing. But I can't simply accept that." John shot a cold glance at Lisa, resenting the interference of the young woman he'd once thought of as just a neighbor. He knew that without her support, Mary wouldn't have had the strength to face this situation, which made him even angrier. "I just wanted something different, Mary." "Is that too much to ask?" he muttered, not really expecting a response. But Mary, with a calm that contrasted with all the pain she felt, simply replied, "If you wanted something different, you could have talked to me, John. But you chose deception, and that's why we're here." After a long silence, Mr. Collins took control of the meeting again, formalizing the details of the agreement. It was decided that half of the prize would be transferred to Mary, while John would keep the other half. The house, as the couple's primary residence, would also remain with Mary, securing her future. When the papers were signed, John looked at Mary with a mix of frustration and disdain. This wasn't the outcome he'd planned, but he knew he had no other choice. As the meeting ended, he stood up, casting one last look at Mary before leaving. "I hope you're happy now," he muttered, his voice laden with bitterness. Mary stood firm, not allowing him to see the pain that still lingered in her heart. "I only hope that one day you understand the value of respect and honesty, John. That's all." When John left, the silence in the room was broken by Mary's sigh of relief. Lisa held her hand, smiling with pride and support. "You were amazing, Mary. You didn't let yourself be intimidated, and now you have what's rightfully yours." Mary nodded, feeling the weight of the situation slowly lifting. The pain of betrayal was still there, but at least she knew she'd done what was fair. The future seemed uncertain, but with Lisa's support and the comfort of having her dignity intact, Mary felt ready to start anew. Mr. Collins bid her farewell, congratulating her on her strength and wishing that this outcome would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Mary thanked him, grateful for the help she'd received from each of them. That same day, she and Lisa returned home. As they walked through the neighborhood, Mary looked up at the sky, feeling the fresh air and a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. "So, what are you going to do now, Mary?" Lisa asked, curious. Mary smiled slightly, seeing possibilities where there had once been only doubts. "I'm going to start over, Lisa. I'll turn this pain into strength and move forward. And if I can, I want to help others, just like you helped me." Lisa squeezed her hand affectionately, admiring her friend's determination. "I'm sure this is just the beginning of a wonderful new chapter for you, Mary." With Lisa's support, Mary knew this wasn't an ending, but the start of a journey that would lead her to discover new dreams and perhaps a new purpose. In the days following the divorce, Mary experienced a roller coaster of emotions. Sadness still surfaced at times, and it was hard to accept that the man she'd loved so much had been capable of such calculated betrayal. But at the same time, she felt a renewed sense of freedom, as if she could finally build something of her own, something real. And by her side, Lisa continued to support her, always ready to listen and encourage her through the first steps of this new phase. Bit by bit, Mary began to reorganize her life. With the money she'd received, she could finally consider making the renovations to the house that she and John had put off for so long. But more than that, she felt she could do something meaningful for herself, something that extended beyond the walls of her home. With Lisa's encouragement, Mary began to explore ideas for investing her money wisely and at the same time, doing something that could benefit the community. "Mary, have you ever thought about starting a small business?" Lisa suggested one afternoon as they sat on the porch, enjoying their coffee. Mary looked at her friend, surprised. "A business? I've never thought about that before," she replied, laughing. "I've always been focused on the house, on John, but now, maybe it's a good idea." Lisa smiled, excited. "I'm sure you'd do great. You've always had a natural talent for organizing and taking care of everything. And who knows, you might create something that could help others too." Mary thought about it. The idea thrilled her, but it was also daunting. She had never managed anything beyond her home, but she felt that life was pushing her toward new challenges. With Lisa's support, she felt ready to take on whatever came her way. She decided that with the money she'd received, she would open a small business in the neighborhood. Over the following weeks, Mary began sketching out a plan to open a small shop selling natural and handmade products. She loved handcrafted items and knew how much the Denver community valued local businesses that offered healthy, sustainable products. With her years of experience taking care of her own home, she knew she could make the store something special, a space where people could find simple items crafted with care and dedication. She and Lisa spent days researching suppliers, scouting rental spaces, and selecting products to offer. Mary's excitement grew with each step, and for the first time in a long while, she found herself genuinely smiling, feeling fulfilled. Finally, after months of planning and hard work, the big day arrived. Mary opened the shop on a busy corner in her neighborhood. The small wooden store had a simple, hand-painted sign that read, "Mary's Essence," a name Lisa had suggested to honor Mary's dedication and the heart she put into everything. The community warmly embraced the new business, and the shop soon became a gathering spot for local residents. Mary felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she chatted with customers, shared tips about the products, and listened to the stories of everyone who walked in. It was as if the store were an extension of her home, a place where everyone felt welcome and cared for. One afternoon, as Mary was arranging some shelves, she saw Lisa walk in with a bright, excited smile. "Mary, you won't believe it," Lisa said enthusiastically. "I just got a job offer from a law firm here in Denver. They were impressed with the internship I did and the experience I got working on your case." Mary smiled, proud of her friend. "Lisa, that's amazing. You really deserve this opportunity." Lisa nodded, moved. "You were my inspiration, Mary. Watching you face everything with such courage showed me what it really means to fight for justice. I want to make it my mission to help others, just like I helped you." Mary felt her eyes fill with emotion. That moment was proof that, despite the challenges, both of them had found new purpose and grown stronger together. She hugged Lisa, grateful for the friendship and support she received every day. "I'm so grateful you were by my side, Lisa. I don't know what I would have done without you." Lisa smiled, holding Mary's hand. "We helped each other, Mary, and we'll keep helping others too." The shop thrived, and over time Mary expanded the space and diversified the products. She began offering small classes and workshops for the community where people could learn about handcrafted items, homemade cooking, and sustainability. The shop became a place of learning, shared experiences, and growth for everyone who visited. Meanwhile, John's fate took a very different turn. Believing that wealth would lead him to a life of luxury and pleasure, he soon discovered that money didn't bring the happiness or success he'd imagined. After spending much of his winnings on extravagant trips and impulsive purchases, John quickly lost control of his finances. Influenced by people who approached him only for his money, he made poor decisions and squandered nearly everything. Before long, he found himself without resources and without anyone to rely on. Alone and filled with regret, he reflected on his choices, wondering what life might have been like if he'd acted with integrity and kept his partnership with Mary. But time couldn't be turned back, and now he was reaping the consequences of his own greed. While John sank into debt and regret, Mary thrived, surrounded by people who respected and admired her. With Lisa's support and the community's affection, she built a fulfilling life based on honesty, friendship, and love for what she did. Over the years, Mary became a beloved and respected figure in the community. People saw in her an example of courage and resilience. Lisa, now a successful attorney, stayed in close touch with Mary, and the two women, so different in age, became inseparable friends, almost like family. Mary knew life would still bring challenges, but now she had confidence in herself and in her ability to face whatever came her way. And as she looked at the shop she'd built with so much effort, she felt a deep peace, certain that her worth would never depend on money or anyone else's choices, but on the strength she had found within herself.